All right. Welcome back, everyone, to the Family Movie Time podcast. I'm your host, Jeff M. Giordano. We are going to talk about The Wiz today. This is one of my personal favorite family-friendly movies. This one's from 1978. It got a G rating back in 1978. My special guest is Tay. Tay is a poet, educator, filmmaker, and event host. Thank you for being here today. I'll let you have the mic. Go for it, Tay.
Thank you. Appreciate you for having me on today. Very excited to talk about the Wiz. As Jeff mentioned, all of those things, but I think the biggest thing is I'm a humanitarian. I'm always for the people and trying to make sure that everyone is living a righteous life and doing well by their neighbors. So I'm happy to be here today and to discuss the Wiz.
Thanks, Tay. And this is The Wiz from 1978. Just a little bit of background. Hopefully, everybody has experienced this movie. Before listening to the episode, we might get into some spoilers or talk about the storyline. So if you haven't seen the movie, try to check it out before listening to this conversation. Otherwise, just enjoy it. The director of the film, Sidney Lumet. The stars, Diana Ross as
Mhm.
Dorothy, Michael Jackson as the Scarecrow, Nipsey Russell as the Tin Man, Ted Ross as the Lion, Maybelle King as Eveline, Teresa Merritt as Aunt M, Lena Horne as Glinda the Good, Thelma Carpenter, Miss One, Richard Pryor as the Wiz. And it is such a production. At the time, it was the most expensive film um, that was made in New York City. It had a budget of $24 million in its day. It only earned $13.6 million in the theaters. So, with the original release, it was a loss for Motown and Universal of 10.4 million. However, um, they did receive 10 million from CBS when they sold the broadcast rights for television. The movie would go on to become a quote unquote cult movie favorite. To this day, I know that it's a favorite among many people. And if you're familiar with Diana Ross, Richard Pryor, they previously worked together in Lady Sings the Blues, 1972. I'll share a few more tidbits. In 1965, Diana Ross and the Supremes performed as a warm-up act for Judy Garland at the Astrodome Theater in Houston. Of course, Garland played Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz 1939. Um, Quincy Jones has a heavy creative influence in this film, from the music to the dances even. And initially, he wasn't sure about casting Michael Jackson, but he later saw his talents as a performer and musician, and he would even ask Jackson to work on a solo album, and they would go on to make three albums, including Thriller. So this movie really became a moment for a lot of people. It was Michael Jackson's film debut, um, and Tay, since you selected the movie, and I was glad you picked this one or listed it among the ones you were interested in talking about, could you talk about the first time you saw this film, what that was like, and then from there, how it has evolved over the years for you?
Yeah. So I first saw the film. Oh, when was that? Many moons ago. I think I was pretty young when I first saw the film. Um, and I thought it was great. I enjoyed it as a kid. Or I'd say a teen. I think it was about a teen, probably preteen or something around that age. Um, yeah, and I enjoyed it. I mean, obviously Michael Jackson was in it. It was familiar faces that I knew or at least heard of, the Diana Rosses. Like we're talking some big icons, right? So it was not only was it entertaining for me, but it was a connection from a cultural standpoint too. Like, oh, I know these people are. I've heard these people. I listen to their music, So I enjoyed it just as a kid. Some of the um, I'd say some of the comments made in there, some of the messages. culturally, once again, it kind of stood with me. Like even like the way the mother would like kind of talk and sing to Diana Ross in the movie and just try to comfort her. Like from a cultural standpoint, that felt like normal to me. So it was very much something that I could relate to. Um, I think as an adult, when I just watched it again yesterday, right? Like I just it's fresh on my brain too, and it's like, oh, like I understand it more from a deeper standpoint now, right? Like when I was watching as a kid, this is just entertainment and it is something that I can connect with. It's representation for sure. But now it's like, oh, when I'm looking at it as an adult, it's like, oh, wait a minute, there's so many messages in this that maybe I didn't catch at a young age because I wasn't looking for it in that way, right? So I would say definitely there's a difference in maturity because I do know more obviously now than I did at 11 or 12 years old. But yeah, I'd say it was still just as much as enjoyable, but I would say now it's more impactful for me because I understand the messages that some of the subliminal messages that were in the movie that maybe some people may not have caught on, or if you're too young, you may not have caught on to it.
Can you talk about the recent experience watching the film and what the messages or what maybe the deeper meanings of the Wiz are for you?
Sure. I'd say, let's see, let me give some examples. I would say when Dorothy was coming up to seeing the crows harassing the scarecrow, right? And they're speaking all this negativity into him and telling him he's dumb and you can't get down from there and the only thing you need to do is honor us and oh no you don't need to read and just sing these songs and just live your life this way. This is how it's supposed to be. I would say from a cultural standpoint and from a deeper standpoint, that is a lot of the things that you would see in slavery, right? Like this whole ideology of not wanting you to know how to read, so you don't educate yourself, so you can't become successful, and you can't really realize your purpose. So it was kind of like this beating down of the self esteem and of the people of the crow in this instance. But I'm saying I comparing that to the people of slavery. So I think I saw that in that, and then as well some of the other little subliminals. I feel like it was many. So let me try to think some of the other ones I saw. Um, I know there was uh, kind of well. Let me just stay on the scarecrow for a second. Kind of just the whole like beating of the self confidence and the negative thinking. I feel like that kept him captured because like even when Dorothy said you always could have come down, you just didn't know it because your mindset was in a place where you've been beaten so bad, and that's where we're trying to get into the oppression aspect of it, right? Like this ideology that oh well maybe I'm not as worthy because I've been told to believe this for so long. So I think that was for me, that was the biggest part for me that I felt like it really resonated. Like, oh, this is bigger than um, just a movie. They really are putting in messages about Black culture and things that we've experienced in America. So yeah, I would say that part. And there was many parts, but I know that part. That one really played in my head the most. There was some other stuff going on, like even with the oh, now I'm thinking when they was a part where Dorothy and them they had just got to or they were on their way to Emerald City, and there was like some dancers and people like being really a distraction, right, to them. And it was like they had gotten caught up in that distraction, and you see them like blow like some sort of dust, which I feel like, oh, was that like supposed to be like drugs, like you know what I mean, to kind of keep them. To me it was kind of like I would compare it to now sometimes living in inner cities, and it's like you're so distracted by the destruction that's around you or the things that look quote unquote fun or a good time when in reality it's just keeping you down because a lot of times you get in that mess and it's like so hard to get out of that. And that is also a form that started from oppression and slavery and redlining and all of these things that happen in America. So you're in these inner cities and you're kind of being influenced, right? So easily, unfortunately, by destruction. So that's what I got from that part too. And I was like, oh, see, they they slipped that one in there. So I was just there was just parts of the movie where I was just like, oh, I see the message. This isn't just about a movie. This is about America and black, what it's like to be black in America is what I felt.
The um the songs the music. It is
Mhm.
a musical, and
Yeah.
almost immediately about 5 minutes into the movie, Diana Ross sings, I think, or her mother sings, her mother's character.
Mhm.
Um, are there certain songs that, you know, that you would say like stayed with you, or that when you rewatched it just yesterday,
Mhm.
were there certain songs that stood out for you?
Well, I think the one I can think of right now was uh the Ease on Down the Road. That's probably the one that stuck out the most to me. And I think because I just think it's once again, I just think it has so much historical meaning behind it, bigger than just like I said, the movie, just the migration of Black people, right? Like, um, and I don't know if I'm getting too deep with it, but it's like it just seemed like trying to escape um, chaos, destruction, and trying to find a better place. Whether we want to look at that from the slavery standpoint or the civil rights standpoint, if we want to, however we want to view it in America, it just felt deeper than just a song. Like basically saying it's maybe difficult, but we still gonna push through. It had a lot of resilience in that song, and even the way they were dancing down with joy, and I feel like that's one of the things that no matter what Black people have been through in this country, one thing we keep is our joy and our dancing and singing and love for one another. So I really like that one, Ease on Down the Road.
The sweatshop scene, when I rewatched the film today,
Mm-hmm.
that one stood out, and it's even maybe a kind of darker in tone, beginning of that scene, and then it kind of loosens up when the music starts. But I think the fact that they call it a sweatshop,
Mm-hmm.
kind of connecting to what you've been saying, um, I felt, the deeper kind of meaning with that.
Yeah, I agree. When I first saw that part, like I said, as a kid, I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of wild. But even as a kid, I knew it had to be something behind it. I just couldn't really pinpoint it. But now as an adult, I'm like, okay, so why would they put that scene in there, right? Because that's what I'm always thinking, like, what is the purpose? Because I think as artists, and as well, like, anyone who's in the arts world, we know that most things that are done is for a purpose. They're not just doing things to do them. You know what I mean? Otherwise, it wouldn't be art. So I'm like, what was the point of that? And I agree with you. I feel like it had a very deep rooted a connection to something much bigger. And I feel like, once again, I feel like that was kind of a reference to slavery because it was like you have all these people working for you doing all these negative things that they may don't even want to do, but they have to do it, right? And it's like, and I remember what was she saying? She was like, don't, what was this? Oh, I can't even think. It was just yesterday, but she was saying something that kind of contradicted who she was. Like if she was saying, telling them, "Oh, don't bring me no bad news." That's what she kept saying. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you are the bad news. Right? So it's like this whole like still like this contradiction of like once again the slavery aspect, like, oh well, you need to be good and you need to do this for me, not knowing the act itself is terrible. Like you are the problem, right? So it's like I felt like that had a deeper connection too. And then even the fact that the way they had to be dressed and the way they had to, you know, uh perform certain things. And then she had her what was them some sort of animals on that
The flying monkeys.
yeah, the flying monkeys. There we go. That part, even that, I was like, okay, so what is that supposed to be a representation of? Like, go catch them, and I don't know. It just felt really, just evil. It just felt really evilly rooted, and like I said, it just to me once again, it just made me think about things like when the slave catchers used to go out or like police brutality. Like it just brought up a lot of emotions for me as an adult. And I don't know if it's just because I've lived a lot more life and understand what's happened in America. That's still somewhat happening in America. But yeah, it was wild that part, that scene, and not necessarily in the best way. So yeah, I definitely agree with you. That was something different. That I know that they wanted older people to see that and feel something and realize that this is not just about a sweatshop. Not saying that any sweatshop is okay, but I feel like in this particular scene, it was about slavery. And even she was whipping. Yeah, she had a whip out as well in the scene. So it was just like, wait a minute. So what's that whip for? You know what I'm saying? So, like I said, there was little subliminal messages in it.
To talk about Richard Pryor for a moment,
Mm-hmm.
plays as the Wiz in the film.
Mm-hmm.
Um, did you know that he did a children's television series for one season in 1984? And it was like a live action series. It was called Pryor's Place.
I actually did not. That's a little bit before my time, but I know who Richard Pryor is because he's an icon.
It's an interesting, it's like, so the movie was from 78. So 84, this season came out and they were trying to do it in the spirit of Sesame Street. So a cast of puppets hanging out, having fun in a friendly inner city environment with several children and characters portrayed by Pryor himself.
Mm-hmm.
The theme song was even performed by Ray Parker Jr., who did the Ghostbusters theme
Ah,
song.
okay.
So it's an interesting part of Pryor's career because, as we know, he started as a comedian
Right.
with a lot of profanity and adult topics he would speak about as a comedian, and then to do The Wiz and Pryor's Place, to have some family-friendly Richard Pryor content, I think is always a treat.
Right, right, right. Yeah. I thought that
Um,
was pretty cool to see him as the Wiz in there. Yeah.
yeah, and I think his mustache, what I read too, the first role where he would wear a mustache, and then after the film, it became a permanent part of his popular image.
Yeah. Yeah.
With the songs, I think you mentioned the word earlier, a humanist, um, or humanism. And I think some of the songs are about taking chances, overcoming fears,
Mm-hmm.
making big decisions in life.
Yeah.
Um, and then the these ideas of like towards the end of the movie, um, this sense of home and home being talked about in different meanings in different ways. Home is knowing, or home is, you know, like a certain comfortableness or self confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And then this idea of believing in yourself.
Yeah.
A lot of the music um, returning to that, and this idea of like there's a whole world out there. Somebody says to Dorothy like you can't just stay in your living room or your kitchen. You need to.
Yeah. It was her mom.
Yeah, her mom, it tells you need to explore, you need to get out
Mm-hmm.
there. And I found those, ideas interesting too. And then this kind of idea of like moving away from your home or the home you grew up in, the family you
Mm-hmm.
grew up with, the people you grew up with. Um, Friendship, of course. There's a moment where Michael Jackson's character speaks about friendship, and it might be Michael Jackson's character that also talks about success, fame, and fortune being illusions. Did you catch
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that? Was interesting too. And the we should give some time to the other performers. Do you want to speak about Diana Ross, or did you have any notes or thoughts about the other performers?
Yeah. I think for me, Diana Ross's character in here is interesting because she's like she's more um powerful than she even thinks she is, right? Because in the beginning of the movie, she's kind of singing these songs, not knowing her purpose, just kind of seeming like she's confused about what she wants to do. And it almost feels like there's a level of fear there too, right? So it's interesting because the moment she's kind of swept up in that snowstorm or whatever you want to call it, her Toto, her dog, it's like, yeah, when she initially arrives and oh, and that's another thing we should probably talk about, like the little Munchkin land, how much different it was. It was so much more urban with the graffiti and then popping out of the graffiti and really giving light. So this is what I'll say before I'm sorry, I know I'm kind of rambling, but let me just say this part. I feel like the movie itself, because it was more of like an urban type of movie, just the settings, right? Like just the fact that it was like when she went into this world, it wasn't some beautiful, glorious place, or it was like it was very much Harlem, New York. You know what I'm saying? Like it was that urban feeling and even though she was a little bit afraid at the beginning, you see as her journey as she continues on, she's motivating everybody else and telling them, no, you can maybe we can go and ask for you to have a brain, or we can go to ask for you to have, a harder, whatever the case may be. She's the one uplifting everybody else. But in reality, she was actually at the beginning very fearful and didn't know her purpose. So I really think that part stood out to me too. Her as a character, not really even understanding her own inner strength. And because it takes a lot to be able to uplift other people, you have to have that within you. And she didn't realize that at the time. And I think she definitely realized it by the end. So yeah, I think her character was really interesting for me. I also think who was other character? Just all of them, because even Tin Man, like this whole ideology of him like, well, I don't have a heart, and I'm not feeling, but he's crying. You know what I mean? Like there's parts where he's like crying. Um, and then the same thing with Tin Man, I mean not Tin Man, Scarecrow, him thinking he doesn't have a brain, but he's talking about knowledge is power and he wants to learn more. And he's so it's just like once again, it's like I feel like as a whole, as all of the cast, it was really about them finding their own inner purpose, their own inner strength, being able to know that they do all have a purpose in life. And I think that's huge just from outside of the movie level. That's just what people need to do in general. You have to be able to tap into your inner self and realize that you're here for a purpose and you matter. And I think that movie did a good job of displaying that and allowing people to see that, a lot of times you might doubt yourself, but you've had it all along. Like you've always had this type of hopefulness and realness within you. It just was up to you to get your mind right to realize that it was always there all along. So, yeah, that's what I think. And then Lena Horne being the Good Witch, I think that was awesome. I mean, Lena Horne is such an icon. And who else? Oh, the Lion. We can talk a little bit about the Lion if you like. I think that was interesting too because his courage came out differently, right? No, he wasn't, the stereotypical idea of a lion and being aggressive and but he had courage because when it came down to it, he was willing to put up a fight. I remember there was this scene when the scarecrow was getting attacked by the trash cans and he was there trying to fight him off and protect his friend. And so he definitely always had courage all along. It just didn't look like the typical courage of a lion. So I don't know. There was a lot of, like I said, little messages in there that I feel like um, from a Black community standpoint, it spoke to me for sure.
I want to say the set design, the production design, the lighting, the costumes, the sound design, the color palette, um, and the dance choreography. All of these technical elements
Mm-hmm.
are like, I think some of the best
Oh
work
yeah.
in
Oh man. I was
in
like, let
in
me
a
get that
film.
outfit. I like them greens, they're gold. I was like, I want that outfit.
And
Very nice outfit.
you mentioned the urban environment. The one
Yeah.
of my favorite scenes is in the subway, and the subway pillars
Uh-huh.
come alive, and then they're going after the characters. And you mentioned the trash cans, which are in the same subway scene. Just,
Yeah.
highly creative and imaginative. Like I'm always impressed by that subway scene in particular.
Yeah. That subway scene was intense. And what I want to say again is like once again, there was a message behind that. You know what I mean? It wasn't just oh, this is a cool subway scene. From my standpoint, when I saw that scene, I was like, oh, this is like being attacked for trying to wanting to do to go further and beyond and be successful and want to better yourself. Oh no, you're gonna have all these little traps lined up, right? Or somebody trying to come after you because you do want to do better. So that's how I saw it. I was like, oh, this is intense right now. And as much as it was, entertaining and interesting to view, I felt like it was something else behind that.
There's a lot of moments in the movie of characters encouraging other characters, whether it's family members or Dorothy's interactions with, the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, the Lion. When you think about your own life, do you think of teachers or I guess family members or specific people who encouraged you when you were younger and or helped you kind of stay on that like positive mindset and productive mindset?
Oh, for sure. Like I said, when I even as a kid when I watched it, that was one of the things that stood out to me was the encouragement. I come from a family who my parents that are very very loving, very supportive, who really spoke life into us as children, me, my brother, and my sister. No matter the circumstances, no matter what was going on, they always taught us to love ourselves and love other people. So that type of talk was always common in my household. So that resonated with me even as a kid, like the way they would sing the songs and those type of words they'd use, keep going and don't give up, try your best. Like those type of things have always been around me for so long. So yeah, so that part even more so as an adult, because I'm like, oh, as an adult I do those things now, right? Because that's who I am. That's who I was kind of taught to be. So I see that from a family standpoint. I see that from an educational standpoint and how I work with the youth. And I also see that from other teachers too, other educators, not just teachers, because education is wide. Yeah, I definitely think those affirmations that I always tell people, like, you really want to help a child, teach them to love themselves. Because if you can teach them to love themselves, they'll love everybody else too. The problem is a lot of times people don't love themselves. People don't feel good about themselves and they put that type of energy into the world. And it's like, it's so negative, and then that once you go down that road where you don't love yourself, there's so many things that can happen not only to you, but to the ones around you because you don't care, right? You don't, because if you don't love yourself, you don't a lot of times care about yourself. It's nothing to care about. So I always say, speaking life into students, speaking life into children, which is one of the reasons why I love working with youth because I speak life into youth every day at my job and I love it. So yeah, all those songs, all those messages really resonated with me as a child and even as a woman today because I do that.
With the ideas of like fitting in that come from the whiz, being happy,
Mm,
um, what can you say as an educator on the topic of like, developing your own identity
mm.
and your own sense of self, but also, wanting to be part of a community, participating, collaborating with others, getting along with others. Can you speak about that kind of balance with working with young people?
Yeah. So like I said, I come from a very loving family. My mother, she instilled in me at a very young age that I'm an individual, um, that I should embrace who I am as a person. And the right people will like it and the wrong ones won't, but that's okay. You love on everybody. You show love to everybody, but obviously you still stand up for yourself. So it was a very interesting balance in my life growing up because my mother was like, you be good to people, right? That's you come in initially treating people with respect. However, you're not going to be ran all over either, right? Don't let people disrespect you because at the end of the day, you treat people how to treat you, right? Whatever you're willing to take, people are gonna give you. But if you stand up for yourself, then they'll know, oh, she's not the one to mess with. She's loving, but at the end of the day, don't play with me, right? So I grew up in a household like that. So I think I maybe not in those exact terms. I always use those terms when I'm dealing with the youth, but I do kind of that's kind of my reference always in the back of my mind to let them know it's okay for you to just be yourself. right? The right people will come along, the wrong ones, that's okay. You know, you can be cordial with people. Everybody ain't your friend. That's another thing my mom used to always say. Everybody's not gonna be your friend. That's the reality of it, right? And I think when you're dealing with youth, they're so caught up a lot of times in trying to make friends and trying to be accepted and trying to, be in with the, the latest trends and all of these things. And it's like, if you just focus on yourself for a minute and really realize the things that you like, it's going to be so much easier to be around people that are much like you, right? Because the problem is you're trying to fit in sometimes to places that you actually don't even like. Like in reality, you're just doing it because you think it's cool. So I think once again, going back, right? Knowing you're trying to find that inner self, understanding who you are as a person. There's no reason for you to be hanging out with all of the football players when you want to be in the band. You know what I mean? Like, or vice versa, right? You're in the band, but you actually want to play football. It's like, well, that, of course, you're not going to ever really feel whole because you're not living in your truth, right? So I always tell kids when I meet with them and we do any sort of activities, like, I just need you to be honest, not for my sake, but for yours. Just be real with yourself. And then at that point, everything else will happen in a way where it's a positive way because you're just being honest. And the biggest thing is that's the issue. Kids, unfortunately, their brain isn't fully developed, so we'll give them that, right? But it's like, even as adults, there's some adults that aren't honest with themselves and not real with themselves about what they really want in life. So, yeah, I hope that's not getting too off the topic, but that's kind of how I feel about it.
Can you think of other films as you were growing up when you were a younger person, um, especially ones that were live action family friendly movies? Can you think of other titles that you found to be you learned something from it? It wasn't just like entertainment when you were younger.
Yeah. Um, I really enjoyed Edward Scissorhands. It's probably one of my favorite movies of all. I was 3 years old. My mom used to tell me I used to sit in front of the TV and watch Edward Scissorhands with Cheeto Puffs, and I'd watch it repeatedly because when it go off, I tell her put it back on again, and I just watch it over and over and over again. And I think even at that small of an age, I always knew I was different, and I something about Edward Scissorhands resonated with me because he was different. Um, wasn't a he wasn't what the world had made him out to be, right? So I'd say Edward Scissorhands. Um, I don't know if this is really considered a live action, but I used to love Matilda. Matilda was one of my favorites. I loved that she liked to read, and she was a sweet kid, and she had all these magical powers, and I don't know, something about her. I felt like me and her had some sort of connection. So, um, and then Miss Honey, I had my own Miss Honey at home, mother. So, and then I also had a Miss Honey in school when I was in the third grade, Miss Sheehan, which I'm still connected to her to this day. She was my favorite teacher, my third grade teacher. So she reminded me a lot of Miss Honey as well.
For holiday movies,
Mm-hmm.
can you talk about favorite holiday movies over the years?
Yeah. Jingle Jangle, which is kind of still new. It came out what like I say like 2 or 3 years ago. I know it's not that old. It's on Netflix. I'd highly recommend folks to watch it. It's a great movie. Really talks about an inventor and how over time he had been betrayed by somebody he used to work with, like his apprentice, and he just kind of lost all hope because he stole all of his ideas. And I don't want to give too much of the movie, but he ended up losing all hope, and it was his granddaughter who helped make him be hopeful again and get back into inventing and realizing his talent. So I'd recommend that one. I think that one came out like either in 2019 or 2020. So I definitely recommend that if someone's looking for a good holiday movie. Jingle Jangle, A Christmas Journey is really good. It's on Netflix.
You mentioned the word hope.
Mm-hmm.
Being an educator, how do you create a sense of hope, or how do you, help young people to feel hopeful for the future?
Well, um, through connection, communication, I really try to build rapport with these students that I work with. I meet them where they're at. I talk to them. I learn about them. We exchange information in the sense of like, um, it, it's so much. I'm just genuine with them, and they know that automatically. I'm actually one of the people at the school site that they do like these little wellness surveys sometimes, and to see where kids are at. And when I talk to kids, they always tell me that they feel like I'm one of the most trusted adults on campus, and it's because, like I said, I meet kids where they're at. I'm very genuine with them. I'm very honest with them. So I think in order to build hope in a child, you got to know the child first, right? You need to know who. You can't just. I can't just walk up to a kid and be like, "Oh, shoot for the stars. You'll be great." Like, yeah, they might hear that, but they're not gonna believe that because they don't know me. They just probably think I'm some crazy woman walking down the street just telling everybody that. But it's like really building a rapport with students, and so that's what I do. I learn my kids. Anyone who comes, and they all my babies, all my kids. So anybody who comes in my classroom or anybody who's a part of my workshops, anybody at the school at all, they always know that Miss Shantae's door is open, and everybody knows that, and they can come in and talk to me. And when we talk, I speak life into them. I tell them, whatever you want to do, just know you can do it, and put forth, the time and the effort. That's all it's about. Because at the end of the day, I don't. What I've always wanted to do is to let kids know that they have infinite possibilities. They have the infinite potential, but it all comes down to your own mindset. Like you have to want it for you enough. I can't do it for you. Your teachers can't do it for you. Your mama, your daddy, whoever. We can't do that stuff for you, but you already have it in you. Like it's already there. You exist. You're here. So go live. So I always try to speak life into them and let them know, no matter what their circumstances are, they can either become better, or it doesn't have to stay the same. So
In the contemporary cultural media landscape, The Wiz, a great movie made in 1978. Um, the world has changed a lot since 1978. What do you, when you look at the contemporary landscape for movies, shows, music, culture, where do you find inspiration, or what are the, films or shows that you think are encouraging, especially to young people, that have good messages or valuable information, to learn from, how to be a person or how to have meaningful, connections, relationships.
um, I would say one of the shows that still with me, because I don't really watch a lot of TV, to be honest with you, because I'm always so busy. But I'll tell you, This Is Us. That was probably one of my favorite shows. Um, and I know it was like what 2015, 16, something like that when it first came out. But it had like 5 or 6 seasons. It was out for a minute. Um, and I think that is a wonderful show for students to watch and families because it really does show. First of all, it shows real life. I feel like when I watched that, it was like, oh yeah, that could really happen. You know what I mean? Sometimes you could watch something that's like, oh, this seems like really fake. Like that's not how the outcome might be. But from like just off the bat of the show, like if you have you wait a minute, have you seen This Is Us? Like the show?
I haven't seen it. No, not yet.
Oh my goodness, you should. You should
Okay.
watch it because just right off the bat, it's so real because it's like things may not always be perfect in life, but what you have to learn to do is make the best of your circumstances. Once again, there's this hopefulness in it. And if you watch the show, there's so much hope in that show. And like I said, once you see the first episode, you're gonna be like, what the heck? Like you're gonna be hooked because it's just there's this continuum of like, um, first of all, they try to make it to where it's very it's a mystery. It's a mystery in the beginning. But as time goes on, they did such a great job of revealing that mystery, not only revealing it, but doing it in a way that is so emotionally like I used to have my cry of a week when I watched this show because it was so powerful, right? So, and I'm not saying that everything you got to cry about, but it was just so real. It was like, wow, So I would definitely say This Is Us if students want to have some hope or families want to have some hope. I also like the spinoff of the new Fresh Prince of Bel Air. I've been watching that. I think it's a great family show. It's very realistic.
I
So
used to watch the original Fresh Prince when I was younger. That was a
oh
favorite.
yeah, for sure. Me too. That's actually one of my favorite shows. That Martin Lawrence, Uh, what other stuff I used to watch a lot growing up?
Martin
All
was
that.
good.
I used to watch all that. Um, what was the one that used to come on Nickelodeon? It was kind of spooky. What's that one? Something after. No, no.
Are
Are
you
you in
afraid of
the
the
dark?
dark?
Yes, I used to love that one. So I've watched all kind of stuff growing up. But anyways, I'm sorry. Back to get on topic.
Yeah.
Yes. So This Is Us, I would say, and definitely Fresh Prince, the old one and the new one. You know, watch watch all of that. Those are some powerful shows for sure, and has a lot of life lessons in them.
I'll share that I liked. It made me think of, you mentioned the older shows. Family Matters, was that the one with
Oh,
Urkel?
yeah, I
I
used to
used
love
to
that show
watch
too.
that. Yeah, I enjoyed that show. That was a cool show, and
Boy
they,
Meets World, that was
yeah,
good.
that one.
Yeah. Uh, Step by Step.
Yeah. Full
Um,
House, I haven't watched
oh,
that.
oh, freaking loved. I freaking loved Full House. So yeah, that was really good. Yeah, now we're going old school. Let me see. Now I'm thinking. Now my mind's going. Let me see. What can I think about old school? Hmm. Huh. Trying to think of some other. Oh, Sister Sister. I used to love Sister Sister. A lot of life lessons in that. Different World. I don't know if you ever watched Different World. That was really good.
I don't think I saw that one. What was the premise or the storyline for that one?
So Different World was a spinoff of the Cosby Show, and it was when his
Oh,
daughter went off to college. And what I loved about that show is it talked a lot about HBCUs, and at that time, a lot of people weren't talking about HBCUs, so it really kind of put a spotlight on HBCUs, and yeah, it was really good. So yeah, it was basically about a bunch of college kids and their experiences, which is called A Different World because it was, it just showed like all the things that people go through during college time and that at the HBCU. So yeah, Different World was really good.
what about books? Do you ever like recommend books to students or adults? Or have books been a way for you to, how do I put it? You know, or do you have favorite books when you were a kid, whether they were children's stories or other, novels?
I'd say right now what I'd recommend is so as you stated earlier, I'm a poet too. So I actually wrote a poem about a book recently, probably last year, and I performed it. Things all come full circle. I ended up performing it at a community college that I used to go to, and at that community college, the book author is actually the professor from that college. So I met my professor at Solano Community College. I'll tell you exactly where it's at. It's in Fairfield. And he ended up writing a book called The Mysteries of a Middle Schooler. Now, I work in education. I work for the district office and I work at a middle school. So it was one of those books that I actually ended up incorporating into a lot of the work that I do now. And he's going to have series of books. Right now, he's on the second series. I think he's going to at least go up to three. So I definitely would recommend Mysteries of a Middle Schooler. um, the author his name is Tonmar Johnson, and it's a very interesting book because it touches on the fact that there's a lot of people from history that has never been acknowledged. So, and a lot of them are Black and brown folks. To be honest with you, it's a lot about people who were kind of um, forgotten about or never wanted to be known about. So he touches on that, and it's really interesting because it's true history. So it's actually history in this book, and it's still some sort of like sci-fi, like because it's about twins, a boy and a girl, fraternal twins, and they go back in time and they get to meet some of these phenomenal people from our histories that was never taught. They get a time machine. They create a time machine because one of them is he's into like he's a scientist and all that. So yeah, I definitely recommend that book. And he just had his second book come out. Was it maybe a month or two ago? So I definitely would recommend folks to read The Mysteries of a Middle Schooler. And like I said, it's by Tom Moore Johnson.
I'll put links to some of these titles for the book in the description of the video.
Okay.
Um, and we still have a little bit of time. Is there anything back to the Wiz? Is there anything that you want to mention, or whether it's like from the notes you took or things that you thought about when you watched the film yesterday?
Sure. I'd probably say towards the end, and hopefully everybody who's watching this, I don't want to be a spoiler either. I don't know if everybody saw the movie, but I'll just say this towards the end, when Dorothy accomplishes what was supposed to be done, with the water and the witch and all of that. I think it was interesting to see the folks in the sweatshop kind of take off their mask and kind of truly reveal themselves. And then the music was playing, talking about like, freedom and brand new day and all of these things. It was very emotional for me because, like I said, when I watched it now, I see it from a deeper standpoint, and it was almost like freedom, like real freedom, 1865 freedom. So it felt like they were finally free, and they can just be themselves and not have to go off of all of these rules and regulations and all of this oppression. And it was powerful. It was powerful to see them because even when they were taking off their masks, if you noticed in the movie, they had their real hair showing, or they had, culturally their braids, and like it just felt so empowering, I would say. Yeah.
You mentioned crying while watching a movie or experiencing art. Uh,
Hmm.
what do you think is the role of crying like for human beings? Do you think we should cry every so often, or you
Oh, I
know
think a healthy cry is. I think crying is healthy.
whether it's a joyful cry or not a
It doesn't
joyful?
matter. Like I'm not saying you got to boo because something sad is happening. I think if you cry in joy, oh man, that's just as good. Like I think it's healthy for us to cry because it's a part of us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do it. You know what I mean? Obviously, it's something we should do. And it's unfortunate that so many times the crying does come from sadness. I wish it did come more from joy, you know? So, yeah, do I think human beings should cry? Absolutely. I don't care who you are, what you identify as. I think everybody should cry. Every once in a while, you need a good cry, you know? I mean, I know a lot of times we talk about like laughing to keep from crying, especially in my community, we're such jokesters because so much stuff is so heavy a lot of times. But every once in a while, it's okay to just cry. There's nothing wrong with it. It's human. We're all human. So yeah, I definitely think it's important to cry. And I'm an arts person, so I'm the type of person when I write sometimes, depending on what I'm writing my poems, I'll be crying through my poem because it's what I'm feeling. So yeah, like I said, I'm probably not the best person to ask about crying because I cry often. I probably cry more than most people, whether it's joyous or sad. But yeah.
With respect to poetry,
Hmm.
how did you might have shared it earlier, but could you talk about like was it a teacher that you know at a young age taught you about poetry or writing poetry or appreciating it, and then it just stayed with you? Like I remember it was like freshman year in high school, I had a teacher, Mrs. Deary, and that was just it. Like then I was like into poetry, writing it on my own after the poetry, chapter was over. Could you talk about your kind of connection to it?
Yeah. So my journey to poetry uh definitely wasn't probably most people's journey to poetry. Um, from a young age, I had a lot of feelings and I didn't know how to express them. I didn't always talk a lot. I was a very quiet kid. Um, but I felt things like I always been I guess, very empathetic, always feeling for others. So at like about 8 years old was the first time I picked up a pen and I just would start jotting it down. And I remember I would like put notes and poems under my mom and dad's room for them to read. And my mom was like, well, what made you write that? She'd be asking me. I'm just like, I don't know. That's just what I feel. So I don't know what exactly. I can't say that I can pinpoint a person that really helped me write poetry. I just started writing poetry because I needed to express myself and I didn't know how to always do it vocally. So I was like, well, I'll write it down because I knew it was things that needed to come out and just needed to be expressed. So yeah, my journey to poetry was just me needing to express myself, and I didn't know how to do it well through communication vocally. And then as that time went on, yeah, I just found myself doing it all the time. It was like my outlet. It was because, I never felt like I fit in as a kid. I was always a kid who was probably a little bit more mature than the kids I was around, at least mentally. So it was a lot of crowds that I wouldn't hang out with. And yeah, I just never felt like I fit in anywhere. So that was kind of my outlet to write. I just wrote about, my day, or I wrote about a poem, or and then it took me a long time too to like actually to express it in a community setting. So the first time I actually ever did an open mic, I was like 22, 23, and I was so nervous. I was so nervous, and I didn't want to do it, but I was like, you got to try, like talking myself up, and I did it, and I was, oh my God, it was probably a horrible performance. I feel like, but over time, I told myself, a lot of the poetry that I feel like the world needs to hear. And I just kept pushing myself. And once I got out here into Alameda too, I really dived into it, and I really like started doing more in the community and allowing them to hear my poetry because, as an artist, some of the stuff is so vulnerable. And it's just, it's hard to do. The number one fear is public speaking, especially when you're talking about your own feelings. Like this isn't just something I'm reading from a book that somebody else said. I'm talking about what I wrote. So it's very personal. Um, so yeah, I can't pinpoint who taught me poetry. I feel like I taught myself poetry because it was a way of expressing myself. And the beauty of it all is because, moving forward, a lot of the stuff that I do, even in the film world, there's always a poetic aspect to it because I'm number one, I'm a poet before I'm anything else. I've always been a poet. And even with the film that I did that won the award for the Oakland International Film Festival, the Lunda Award, it started off as a poem. And then I just created it into a documentary and to a film. So, yeah, and that's The Descendants, the story of us. If anybody ever wants to look it up, you can find it on Vimeo. You can also just Google it. It's called The Descendants, the story of us. And um, it's about people's journeys or American experiences, people from all backgrounds and all cultures. But yeah, it started off as a poem. And one of my favorite proverbs, Native American proverbs, that says, all the flowers of all the tomorrows are in the seeds of today. So yeah, I would say poetically, I didn't have much of an influence other than myself, and just knowing that these feelings need to go somewhere. So where am I going to put them if I can't say them? At least not at that moment. So I'll write them down. And then as I got older and grew, I said, oh, well, now I can say them. Like I'm brave enough to tell people what I'm feeling. So it really was just this whole like transformation of just like feeling like I'm coming out of my shell from a child, and now I'm just blossoming. So yeah.
As a filmmaker, what kind of projects are you looking forward to making or developing in the near future? Could you talk about a project or two?
I really like documentaries because I'm a realist. Like I really like stuff that's authentic and genuine. And I'm not really, it's funny though, because I actually like to watch like dramas and things, things of that nature. But I I think my heart is with documentaries. So I think moving forward, a lot of my work will probably be documentaries. Um, I don't exactly have exactly what I'm going to do next. Right now, I'm really focusing on um, getting a book out there, some of my poetry books. But yeah, I definitely feel like even with that, right? Because like I told you, a lot of my poems give life to these ideas that I have for film. So I do feel like it'll probably be the next one will probably still be a documentary because I'm really into documentaries. I like real life stuff. I like to learn about people. Even for instance, for the Descendants video, that's what it's all about. It's about people talking about their lineage and where they come from, and whether it was here or somewhere else. Um, Yeah, I think that's important because I think sometimes we can get too caught up in make believe and pretending, that we forget there's a lot of real stuff that's going on that's just as beautiful or just as so much, for a lack of a better word, entertaining. You know what I mean? So I'm really into the roots of realness. So I like documentaries.
Maybe down the road, you would be hired perhaps to direct a family friendly movie, like a live
Hey,
action, live
hey,
family friendly movie, maybe down the road.
that'd be awesome. That'd be great.
Um, I want to thank you again for talking today. And The Wiz, I think just to share, my closing thoughts. There's not a lot of violence in the movie, and you could even argue a lot of it is accidental with Dorothy's arrival to, this new place. Somehow, accidentally, the witch dies, from her arrival. There's not really a lot of violence per se, which I'm trying to focus on with this podcast. And This movie, I don't know if we should avoid talking about Wicked or or say a little bit about it, but I think it probably influenced, other films that have been made over the years with the Wizard of Oz storyline in some regard. Um, I will say with this one, if you haven't seen it, definitely see The Wiz. I think it's really is one of the best um, films ever made. I'll even say just the production value, all the talented, singing, dancing, the costumes as we spoke about earlier. Um, and I think that's it. Did we miss anything, Tay?
I probably just want to end it on this. I like to say that I feel like when I was watching The Wiz, and what I could say I truly appreciated was, towards the end when the wizard is telling Dorothy, um, only you know, only you can come up. I think it was so powerful to see her loyalty to her friends and be like, nope, because if they're not coming, I'm not coming. And it just reminds me of, the old African proverb, each one teach one. Even throughout the whole thing, that's what she was doing. Like, you should come along too. And, like making sure that we're bringing people in, regardless of what your race is. This isn't just about race. This is just about making sure that we're making other people feel empowered. It's not about you being powerful. It's about empowering others. So I really like the fact of that movie because I feel like she did a good job throughout that whole time of making other people realize their potential too. Like it ain't just about me. Like, what I mean? We can all like be successful. We can all come together. So like I said, it just made me think about the proverb, African proverb, each one teach one.
Thanks, Tay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll put some links in the description so you could see Tay's documentary and some of the other films we mentioned. I'll try to put some links for those. And We'll see you next time, everybody.
All right.
Bye
Definitely
bye.
have a good night. Thank you. Thank you, Jeff, so much. Take
You're
care.
welcome. Bye.
All right. Bye bye.